Hello everyone, welcome back to Lead Genie. I'm Ronita, and I know I had left all of you hanging on a thin string of curiosity the last time because we had just started discussing the story of Shantanu and Ganga and how, despite their pact, Shantanu had broken his vow of silence. He couldn't help himself but go ahead and start asking questions to Ganga while she was on the spree to drown her eighth born into the river water. So continuing from there, as Shantanu couldn't stop himself any longer, he went ahead and sort of coaxed Ganga that, what kind of a mother are you? What kind of a woman are you? How can you be so cruel? Rather than nurturing your child, feeding it, taking care of it, one by one, you have already drowned seven of your very healthy male-born babies, and this is the last sort of the eighth child, and the eighth time you're going to repeat the same thing, and I cannot, as a father and as a king, I cannot allow you to again repeat it. So of course, to that, Ganga is stopped. She stops, and she has not yet drowned the child. So with the child in her arms, she looks back at Shantanu. And now we need to understand that with that question, what Shantanu did was, he had questioned Ganga as a woman, her femininity, her motherhood, and her mothering. I hope here we will have to sort of pay attention to the fact that motherhood and mothering are not the same thing. They are two distinct things. Motherhood is the biological state of being, the physical state in which the woman's body is in, and mothering is the act of nurturing the child, the sort of socially sanctioned mode of conduct that the woman is supposed to perform when she's taking care of her child. Okay, so in that one go, with those series of questions, Shantanu had sort of placed all those big question marks on Ganga's being, on her conduct. Now Ganga places the child into Shantanu's arms, and then she says, okay, so now you've asked me a question, let me give you the answer. The seven babies that I had drowned, and including this eighth one, all these eight babies are the mortal reincarnations of the Ashtavashus or the Ashtarishis, the eight stars, who frame the constellation, who, by the dint of some conduct, had been cursed to a mortal life. But just a mortal, not a mortal life, in fact, that won't be the right way to put it, not a mortal life, but a mortal birth. That means they would just be born as human beings, and then they could be released of that birth. And Ganga, as the heavenly demigoddess, had been given this responsibility that she would be born as a human, she'd be reincarnated as a human, and her womb would be that space which would be utilized to make this curse come into being. That means she will become she'll become the human mother to the eight Ashtavashus or the Ashtarishis, who would be born through her womb. And the moment they are born, that curse would be satisfied, and then they would be relieved of their mortal existence by the way in which Ganga was sort of delivering transcendence to these babies or the Ashtarishis. Nonetheless, the eighth child, which was then named Devvrat, he survived. And he would then grow up to become Shantanu's great son, the famous character from Mahabharata, none other than Bhishma. Right? But then there is again an anecdote to the fact as to why Bhishma was the only one who had to sort of incur such a long, painful, suffering, enduring mortal life. And despite being such an able individual, he was well versed in all crafts of state administration. He was a great warrior. He was a great he had great knowledge of law and jurisprudence. He was the best son that could be. He was a great administrator. He was pro the people. He understood their needs and requirements. Nonetheless, he never got to be the king of Hastinapur, and Hastinapur couldn't have thought of having a greater king than Bhishma ever if finally Bhishma would have ascended the throne. Nonetheless, we'll come to that story again, one after the other. We'll go to the episodes, but the question is, why did Bhishma survive? Now, there's a different part to that as well. In his earlier life, Bhishma was a Gandharva child, and he was a Gandharva, and as a child, he used to happily play around the banks of a river, and his favorite game or his favorite pastime was to catch hold of grasshoppers, break pieces of thorns or prickly branches, and sort of prick those into the tails of the flies and let them go. That means the grasshoppers or the flies would then go around, fly around with with that thorn pricking into their tail, and would then keep on enduring that pain. So young Devrat in his earlier life, by doing this, didn't even know that he was actually creating a hoard of karma, which he would have to repay in his next birth. So this time he had to, he wouldn't just survive, but then he would suffer the way he had made these insects suffer, which is again, you'll be able to continue this logic to the Bhishma Parva, which is one of the very important episodes of the Mahabharata, where all of you know, how did Bhishma die? He was, of course, he had an Ichha Mrityu, we'll come to that. But nonetheless, when he thought that, yes, now I want to die, that is how he died. That means he was, Arjun had thrown thousands of arrows into his body. He fell down onto the ground, and he sort of stayed on that bed of arrows until the particular time when he wanted to leave his mortal body, right? So that's a justification as to why. For every episode of Mahabharata, for everything that happens in it, there's a logic behind it, a story behind it. Okay, that's the fun. That's why they say, everything that's there in that, things that are not even in Bharat are there in Mahabharata, the grand narrative of the Indian subcontinent, right? So that's why Devrat sort of survived. That's the logic behind his survival. But then Shantanu was now a very happy father and a king. He goes back to Hastinapur and happily keeps taking care of the kingdom as a very, very responsible and a very, very sensitive sort of an approachable sort of a king. But on the other hand, becoming a single father, taking care of his son, bringing him on the best way possible. Nonetheless, Devrat continues to have a very important relationship with his mother, because from time to time, through various episodes of his life, through various stages of his life, we see that he is often in conversation with his mother. Often when he's sad or missing her, he goes and sits down next to on the bank next to the river, and starts thinking of her in his mind, and she emerges, comes and has very, very enriching, deep philosophical, spiritual discussions and conversations with her son. And this was a boon given by his mother Ganga to Devrat, that he would have an Ichha Mrityu. That means until and unless he wanted to die, nobody would be able to kill him. There would be no death for him. So he was literally invincible, because apparently speaking, no mortal would ever want to die, right? Death is some sort of a feared concept for all of us. Anyways, so that continues, and Devrat grows up to become the most eligible arch prince that any kingdom could think of. But destiny had a different plan in mind. What was it? Shantanu, the old aging king, who had actually spent a long life taking care of his responsibilities as a father and a king, and being all by himself with no emotional shoulder, no emotional support to sort of, rest on. Now he is almost a very lonely and you could say a love-lorn individual. So one day he sets out of his palace and wants to take a trip down the river. So he goes down to the ferry ghat, and he sits upon the ferry. And what does he see? There's a young, beautiful dame sitting at the next end of the boat, and she is the ferryman. She's the one who will be giving the king a ride across the river. And the king is completely smitten the way he was the first time. He cannot take his eyes off. He starts feeling an exuding amount of emotions at this woman, and he immediately has to find out who she is, and wants to marry her. So after he has reached the other side of the river, once he's trying to he's getting down off the boat, he sort of proposes marriage to this girl, who by now we know is Satyavati. Her name is Satyavati. And Satyavati says that she's actually a girl from one of the local villages on the other side of the river, and she is the daughter of a fisherman. And She generally it's she who is otherwise into the business of selling fish, but because today his her father was sick, so she was doing his job, which is to be the ferryman across the river. So she says, I am not to decide who my husband is to be as a poised young woman. It's my father who is supposed to take that decision for me. So you can come and talk to my father if you want to marry me. So of course Shantanu follows her. And then what happens is, when he proposes a marriage to Satyavati's father, he says that, "Oh king, that's a great honor, but nonetheless, why should I allow my daughter to be married to you? Because she will only be a trophy wife. Because if Devrat is supposed to ascend the throne, what will my grandchildren get from this arrangement? Because remember, here you see that both the women that come into Shantanu's life, they sort of strike an arrangement with him. So marriage, it's a very modern take that we see the text taking. Marriage, rather than the otherwise social conditioning that gives us the notion that marriage is sort of this indestructible, unquestionable institution, we see that marriage is actually a pact, often an economical pact, or you could say a conjugal pact, where the women, like the men, call in equal number of cards, and they essentially have to be allowed their equal share of what should I say, acceptance into this arrangement. Only then they go ahead with this, they negotiate their way into the marriage. They do not they are not ready to be treated like objects in the marriage. So Satyavati places that clause, and of course Shantanu will not accept it because he loves his son. He knows that there couldn't be a greater king for the throne of Hastinapur than Devrat. So the love-lorn king says a no, and he goes back. Nonetheless, in a matter of days, Devrat realizes that something is wrong with his father. He's sad. He is always, lost. He's thinking about something else. He's zoned out. He is reluctant to attend to his, stately duties. So he needs to find out. And after a lot of coaxing, he comes to know about this entire story. So now, as a sensitive son, as a caring, loving son, he sort of goes and meets with Satyavati's father, and he says that, don't worry, I don't have any whatsoever attachment to the kingdom of the throne. So I can assure you that I will not ascend the throne. Satyavati's father is not convinced. He says, okay, you will not ascend the throne. You will leave Hastinapur to my grandkids, but you are such a mighty warrior. In a matter of, it's only a matter of time until when you come back with your forces, and you will sort of attack the kingdom, and you will sort of take Hastinapur from my grandchildren. And that is when Bhishma does something that sort of forever changes his name. He goes from being Devrat to be thereon called Bhishma, or the greatest one, or the acute one. Now I'll tell you that story in my next video. Thank you, everyone.